This last week, I documented what I look like when I'm feeling every emotion. Well, 28 to be exact, but we'll get into why it's 28 later. The goal was to get a photo of me experiencing each one, have a friend label them like flashcards, and then quiz me to see how many of my own emotions I can recognize. In order to do this, I had to construct emotional scenarios in which I would be able to genuinely feel, recognize, and capture each specific emotion. The video about that entire process, as well as the quiz, is coming this week. I gotta get the photos developed still. Apparently it doesn't just take a few hours. It takes a couple days. But I wanted to make this video first to discuss the absolute whirlwind that is forcing yourself to feel everything. I looked up if there was a term for this, and there is. It's called affective forecasting. Basically, we look towards the future and judge how we are going to feel in specific scenarios. This sort of emotional preparedness informs our decision making. If we expect something will cause us extreme emotional distress, it's unlikely that we choose to do that thing unless the alternative is worse. We can reliably expect a lot of emotions, but I found that the anticipation of a feeling can really lessen the intensity of it, sometimes to the point where I didn't even feel the expected emotion at all. A good example of this was fear. I'm someone who's very, very easily scared, to say the least. Fear is a natural response for situations in which I am quickly negatively surprised. So creepy images, superstitious stories, certain noises, even like a creak in my house that I hear at the wrong time can put me in this huge, fearful panic mode. Every place I've lived in, there have been moments at 3 a.m. where I think someone is trying to break in, so I go get a knife from the kitchen and sit in the floor of the bathroom or my room and just wait for an attack while I plan an escape route. I am prone to this sort of paranoid fear, and I'm very familiar with the scenarios that may make it happen for me. Watching a scary movie is enough to keep me on edge for a week. But because of this, I expected fear to be extremely easy to do, and I wasn't happy about doing it. I kept putting it off because I knew, or I thought I knew, what it would do to me. I sat on the floor of my friend's bathroom, I turned off all the lights, and I looked up scary video compilations on YouTube, and I just sat there waiting to be scared. Every time the scare would happen, I felt more relieved than anything. I'm sitting there with some melted boogeyman-looking ass creature breathing into my face on the screen, and I'm not scared. That has never happened to me before in my life. And I couldn't really figure out why I wasn't feeling fear until I realized that I was scared to feel fear. I was building up this expectation in my head of this large amount of fear that I would feel based on the whole, life experience thing. And this expectation, coupled with the fact that I also viewed fear as a goal, cheapened any natural fear that I would have. I was so prepared for a big feeling that I inflated how bad it would be in my head, and when it ultimately came, it was underwhelming. The anticipation was the strongest fear of them all. I was more scared of what could be than what actually was. Because, that's a life lesson I needed to learn for the 100th or 1000th or millionth fucking time. Regardless, emotions you expect may not be as big, or often aren't as big as you think they may be. I am the cat in the box and Schrodinger. We exist in a state of emotional superposition. A big thing for this is I didn't want to feel like I was acting out any of these emotions. If that were the case, I wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to set up all of these scenarios. I got a degree in acting. I could just put my little face in the little camera, go click, click, and then it's done in 15 minutes. But that wouldn't feel real to me. It would feel like I was just wearing what I thought an emotion should look like on me rather than what I would normally express if I wasn't, paying attention to it. But I was paying attention. I couldn't detach from my perception of my expression. I had the camera in my hands like this. I had to take the picture myself because I couldn't trust anybody else to do it. They wouldn't know exactly what I was feeling. And if I were to tell them, chances are I would then be holding on to my emotion in order to pose for them holding the camera. I also wanted the photos to be from a similar distance from my face the entire time so they could be at least similar in look for when I do the whole flashcard things. So I not only had to be the experiencer, I also had to be the observer. This didn't affect some motions, like, do that again. This didn't affect some emotions like elation or anger or disgust. These are things where the self-observation of feeling them is almost a part of it. Like when you're angry, you know it outright. It's as much in your body as it is in your head. But for the less holistic emotions like confusion, what ended up happening was I would be confused, and then I would recognize, like, hey, I'm confused right now. I need to take the photo. And then the second that recognition came, it would take me away from this confusion. My focus on this external locus of confusion, whatever was confusing me, was broken, and it brought me back into a world where my body and mind were no longer confused. We were certain. We knew what we had to do. We knew we had to take the photo. It meant I had to be really fast with some of these photos for certain emotions, and I had to be really deep into the feeling, often for like 10 to 20 minutes at a time, in order to be certain that I wasn't just acting them out for the camera. I'm curious as to how this self-perception of expression plays a role in our day-to-day lives. Sure, we feel things, and sometimes the recognition of that feeling changes the feeling, but what about all those times when we're really not certain what we're feeling at all? Which led to my last observation. I think oftentimes there's no decisive way to feel. And when we're in these scenarios, we can pick whatever fits the context more, or what is more socially acceptable. I allow myself to perceive from emotional viewpoints of other people all the time. I think it's extremely common with everybody. We don't often have enough context, information, focus, or care to really be swayed emotionally to feel a particular way about most things. However, feeling indifferent about a bunch of things isn't a very engaging way to live life. So I think often by choosing to care about something, we also choose to feel, which is what I had to do for this entire experiment. I found it very easy for me to not be engaged in the scenario I was in, because instead I was caring more about getting the shot and what the video edit might look like and the storyline and all these other things. But I had to actively choose to be in the moment, therefore choosing to feel, which felt disingenuous but also extremely familiar. It certainly wasn't acting, because I was genuinely feeling those emotions, but the intensity of them was way less than it would be if they were to occur in organic scenarios that I didn't set up, which, makes perfect sense that I would feel more strongly in real life than I do in an experiment that I'm controlling. But what I noticed is that there's a lot of scenarios in my life that paralleled the flavors and intensities of emotions that I felt during the experiment, which made me question how many of the emotions I experience in my normal life are those that I feel only because I'm choosing to allow them. I've noticed this with perspective before. I like to keep other people's viewpoints in mind and like to analyze every situation from every angle, so for things I'm not too invested in, I can very easily switch between perspectives and view a situation from people's lenses. I didn't realize until now that there's also this emotional component that occurs in a lot of small scenarios in my life as well. Indulging in gossip is a great example. I don't really care about most drama or hearsay or judgmental views on somebody. It doesn't affect me much. And when I'm an outsider to it, when I'm not participating, I think it's kind of lame to judge people. It's a waste of time, mostly. However, I also recognize that I've allowed myself to indulge in it, especially when I can tell it's something that a friend of mine, someone I really care about, wants to do. And I understand that once I allow myself inside the gossip, it can feel mischievous and exciting and contemptuous and all these very genuine emotions. And it's only that decision to step in which brings these emotions to life. I think in the past, I often confused this with acting out emotions. And now I don't believe that to be the case, because that thinking that, if I choose to care about this thing that I wouldn't normally care about, I might not actually feel things. No, that thinking made me view myself as someone who doesn't naturally feel things. Instead, I just saw myself as a mirror who showed people what they wanted to see. While there may be some people-pleasy truth to that point, I disagree with my former self. And I say that emotions, even ones that you only feel because you allowed yourself to, are valid. Which sounds so simple, but there are some emotions that sometimes that you can make yourself feel. through giving yourself this internal permission to engage in scenarios that you know may make you feel a certain ways. Not every feeling has to come from this place of deep-rooted passion or desire or impulse, because not everything you do comes from those places. A lot of what we do in day-to-day life is an ideal circumstance, and allowing ourselves to choose to care is a very human way to find joy in what very easily could be nothingness. And I think that's what this may be all about. Emotions, in a sense, are as much tools as they are toys. On the major level, the situations which you can't help but care about, aka your life, they guide our decision making in order to help us build a life that feels how we want. And on the smaller level, they allow you to play and practice feeling in these areas that you don't need to be in, but it's much more exciting if you are. So in short, choosing to care is cool, and emotions are big and pretty much undefinable, and honestly, only really a product of our language, but I didn't really get into that in this. Maybe I'll discuss that later, I don't really know. But feel things. See what you're like when you feel things. Take everything, examine it, and then stop examining it, and then let yourself live. Even in times when it's way easier not to. Go have fun, you know? I did.